gather reeds and rushes as the season passes.
Hi, welcome to Hark Online, an evening of music that's been inspired by stories and poetry. Hark is brought to you by Darlington with the support of Creative Darlington, and I'm coming to you from the beautiful Crown Street Library. Some of you may remember Crown Street as being the venue of last year's inaugural Hark, and unfortunately we can't hold this year's event here, but we are pleased to be able to bring you a multimedia event with our carefully selected bands and artists who have recorded and animated their performances to bring you exclusive footage of their story-inspired music. Tonight revolves around the theme of Help the Witch. We have based our choices on music inspired by Tom Cox's award-winning short story. Our first artist of the night comes to you from North Wales. Katherine Betteridge is a multi-instrumentalist and visual artist. She's created some intense and mind-bending short films and music based on the poetry of Mary Elizabeth Coleridge's The Witch and of Rainer Maria Rilke and Mark Nepo. Coleridge and Rilke in particular are both notable for having inspired songs with their poetry, so Katherine's work follows in a fine tradition. So pour yourselves a drink or pick up your cuppa, whichever you prefer. And first, to lower us gently into Katherine's creations, I am pleased to present Darlington's own Lisette Auton reading the poem Music by Rilke from a book borrowed from Crown Street Library.
This is Music by Rainer Maria Rilke. Sleeping, to grow at the pure suscitation, so wide awake, it's we, outstripped by such awakedness, that sleep, oh trepidation, strike earth, it sounds dull, earthen, being so much deadened by our objective's limitation. Strike stars, each has a stellar revelation. Strike but one star. Numbers beyond divining fulfill themselves unseen. Atomic powers are multiplied in space, and sounds are shining. And what with us is ear, for their bright showers is somewhere eye as well, in realms not ours. These domes complete the arcs of their designing. Music stands somewhere, just as somewhere too, this light brings ears a tinkling intimation. Only for our perception seems the two so separate. Between this and that vibration vibrates unnamed excess. What smuggled through to fruits and in the cycle of gustation reveals its worth? What message has a scent? Each step we take, whatever our intent, dissolves the boundaries of revelation. Music, you water of our fountain basin, you beam that falls, you sound that mirrors, you whom touch into blessed wakefulness can hasten. You rest in flowing brings completeness to, you more than us, from every whereunto exempt.
I have walked a great deal while over snow, and I am not tall nor strong. My clothes are wet, my teeth are set. And the way was hard and long. I have wandered over the fruitful earth, but I never came here before. Oh, let me in at the door. The cutting wind is a cruel foe. My hands are stone and my voice is blown. And the worst of death is past. I am but a little maiden still. My little white feet are sore. Oh, please lift me over the threshold. Oh, let me in at the door. Her voice was the voice that women have, who plead for the heart's desire. She came, and the quivering flame sunk and died in the fire. It never was lit again on my hearth since I hurried across the floor and let her in at the door.
Having loved and lost enough, I am no longer searching, just opening. No longer trying to make sense of pain, but to be a soft and sturdy home in which real things can land. These are the irritations that rub into a pearl. So we can talk a while, but then we must listen the way that rocks listen to the sea. And we can churn at all that is wrong.
But then we must lay all distractions down and water every living seed. And yes, on nights like tonight, I too feel alone. But seldom do I face it squarely enough to see that it is a door into the endless breath that has no breather, into the surf that human shells call God.
so much, Lisette and Katherine. And now on to the headliner part of the evening, in which we're proud to present music from two of the bands and artists featured on the album Help the Witch. The Help the Witch concept album is made up of 10 songs by 10 different groups who were chosen by author Tom Cox. Every song is inspired by a different story from the collection Help the Witch, and it's packed obviously with witches and hauntings and contemporary folk tales and strange imaginings and folk tales of the future. It's a fantastic collection, and the album too is absolutely brilliant. We're pleased to bring to you first up Jack Sharp, who wrote the song Vanished House based on the story Vanished House in the book, and he'll be followed by Stick in the Wheel, who wrote the electro-folk song Robot based on the story Robot. Stick in the Wheel also make up From Here Records, who produced the album, and both bands will also be playing you some of their original music. But first, again, to lead you into the music's inspiration, we have a reading from author Tom Cox. Please sit back and enjoy. Thanks.
12th of December. I moved here because of the wildness of the place, but I also underrated that wildness. Perhaps because it's not an edge place. It's not at the end of anywhere. If you drive in any direction from here, before long you will hit a city. And when the cities do appear, they appear abruptly, full of industry and smoke. But it is wild. Behind my back garden, sloping down to the valley, are 300 acres of natural woodland. An undisturbed place, somehow simultaneously overgrown and barren, which I could probably walk for the next month and still not fully know. The skeletons of giant hogweed stand proud, despite the snow, beside a ruined pump house. So much vegetation here smacks of death effigy. Beyond is a horizon where nothing grows. I'm starting to feel ringed by something here, something more than snow, something ice hot, but I don't know what it is. I see it in my mind when I think about where I can go, what I can do when the snow goes. It's a barrier, bigger than the snow itself, which stops me getting into the car and reaching the road. That's just a tiny excerpt from my book Help the Witch. My name's Tom Cox. This is a book I wrote in winter 2017 and 2018, and as you will see, it is not snowing here at all. It's a beautiful Indian summer evening in Devon on the edge of Dartmoor. You might have just heard a dog bark there. That's a dog I've hired particularly for this reading. It's one of the black dogs, the black demon dogs of Dartmoor, that Conan Doyle was inspired by to write Hound of the Baskervilles. It will pop up occasionally just through this talk at sort of 3 to 4 minute intervals. Actually, no, it's Bella, who's my next door neighbour's Labrador, quite a gentle sort of black Labrador, who my geriatric cat Ralph decked yesterday. Ralph's 19 and a bit. Very pleased to see he still had that in him. But yeah, it's quite an odd sort of setting to talk about this book, which I think of as a very wintry book. It's at most, it's an autumn book as well, but it's a winter book. It's not to be read in spring or summer. I didn't write it with that in mind, and it was written over the course of one of the hardest winters in recent times. I didn't know it was going to be such a hard winter. What I did is in early December 2017. I'm living back in Devon now, but I was living in Devon then, in quite a sort of gentle place really. I hadn't seen any snow there in the 4 years I'd lived there. But in December 2017, I decided, after years of writing books, 15 years of writing non-fiction, I wanted to write some fiction, slightly spooky fiction, and what I was going to do is take all my possessions and move to one of the highest parts of North Derbyshire and write this book in the winter, a spooky book. This is partly because I'm from that part of the world. I grew up in North Nottinghamshire, and my mum and dad would take me across the border into Derbyshire for walks at the weekend, particularly in winter. We did a lot of that in winter, and I'd just look at these sort of ruined gritstone barns and amuse myself on these walks by telling myself stories about all the dead things moving inside the barns. So I think of North Derbyshire as quite a sort of a wintry place full of ghosts. So I thought it'd be perfect. But so it's like a method writing experiment, me feeling that a place like that in winter would kind of ooze into the book in some way and make the book more atmospheric. But it became more extreme than I could have ever guessed. You might just get a bit of interruption here. My cat Roscoe's just appeared for a stroke. But yeah, it was really much more extreme than I could have thought. I mean, I did go one step further than just going to a high place in Derbyshire, to a wintry place, which was I went on Rightmove in trying to find a house to rent, and you've got all these useful filters on Rightmove, and I used the plague filter on Rightmove to find a house in Derbyshire's premier plague village, which is called Eyam. It's spelled Eyam. I found, I mean, it's a very high place, Eyam, and I found a house about 500 feet or more above the village, very isolated house. And I knew about Eyam's history, which is that during the plague in the 1600s, they sealed themselves in. They got the plague and they sealed themselves in, the residents of the village, so as not to spread the plague to the surrounding villages in Derbyshire and Yorkshire. But as a result of this, about 4/5 of the population died of the plague. And in winter it's a very, very sombre, spooky sort of place, because you've got an unusually large graveyard for a village of that size, but then you've got other graves just in fields, gardens, just all over the place, all around on the hillsides, and then probably loads more that we don't even know are there. And there's one particular sombre spot called the Riley Graves, which is where a woman had to bury several members of her family in the same spot during 1 week. Bleak spot, but that was kind of like suburbia compared to where this cottage I was living in was. And when I got there, there was a blizzard going on, and I immediately decided the house was haunted by what I thought was a ghost dog. But I soon found out what it actually was, and that immediately inspired an opening story about someone more southern, academic, a bit softer than me, in the same sort of situation, which was quite strange because I thought of the title "Help the Witch" before that. It popped into my head about a month before that when I was crowdfunding the book with Unbound, which is what I do to be able to write slightly weirder books than I perhaps might be able to write for a conventional publisher. So I got "Help the Witch," but then the situation in the house really, really gave me a story which lent itself to that title kind of perfectly, which is what I just read the excerpt from. It's a sort of diary form. It's the title story that opens the book. I actually think it's arguably the weakest or second weakest story in the book. I'm not advertising the book very well here, but I mean, it's the most autobiographical. The character is different to me in the sense that he's in this wintry situation with what might be a ghost in this farmhouse, which he can't get out of because he's snowed in. I was snowed in that entire winter, pretty much, with just little excursions occasionally to get out, but most of it was characterised by just huge snowdrifts, because it was the beast from the east, as they called it, that winter, and it hit the Peak District pretty much as bad, at least as bad as anywhere else in England. So the character is going through the same sort of thing as me. But yeah, I made him different. I made him softer. I also added this thing where he's recently heartbroken, which I absolutely was not at that point. Hello, I'm back. My bottle of beer that I was just balancing the phone on just fell over there. Yeah, so I sort of went for more of an autobiographical thing, but I then actually wrote the real account of what happened to me in my subsequent book, non-fiction book, Ring the Hill, and I sort of felt that it was turned out to be better, but a lot of the stories are about a lot of different things in Help the Witch, really, really various sets of stories, and I think people came to that opening story thinking that it might be a bit more of a conventional book than it actually is, but it's got third-person narrators, first-person narrators, it's about robots, it's about speed awareness courses, it's about the power of buildings, it's about many, many different things, but I think there's an undercurrent of winteriness that kind of holds it together. And maybe the other undercurrent is there is this kind of thing of people being persecuted, women being persecuted throughout history. So the witch thing is sort of there in the background, but not in every story. I think it's more that winteriness, that strong element of landscape, almost as a character, almost like landscape could be the ghost. I think those are the things that hold it together. And I'll be back in a little while to read another story, a slightly longer excerpt from it. But what I also wanted to say is, as I was writing it, I almost thought of it as an album. I mean, I've thought of this with like my last 3 books. In fact, my last 4. Kind of like the chapters, the order's important of the chapters or the stories, but only in the sense of like an album has a sort of narrative to it, and you put the tracks in a certain order, even though it's not quite a concept album. So I was thinking of that, and music was just a big part of it, of what was inspiring me. But I thought, wouldn't it be great if I got some people to record songs based on each story, each of the 10 stories. Just checking, there are 10. Not very good at counting. Yeah, there's 10 of them. And I think I'm really lucky here in that over the years I've kind of built up a sort of friendships with some really, really talented, amazingly talented musicians, some of which I know better than others, and I asked if they could do something for the book, if they might be up for it, and all of them said yes, which I was absolutely amazed by. I felt very lucky about that, and I really just said, just take the story as a starting point. Don't be rigidly defined by what the story is. Just do that and go crazy. Do whatever you want. And the result was just like beyond my wildest imaginings, really. I just kind of instantly heard it and went, God, this is just so much better than the book itself, which I was hoping for, really, and I was expecting. There's just and there's a mood, actually, even though these are people who they hadn't heard each other's songs when they did it, but there is a sort of sustained mood to the record, but it's also incredibly diverse, and I was just so impressed, and it just feels like such a special thing to have an album to go with your book, and I thought, well, I'll do this again sometime.
for now I must leave you all across the wide ocean. Our ship we must steer. Don't let our long voyage to trouble and grieve you, for you know I'll be back in the spring of the year. Oh, like some little sea boy I'll dress and go with you in the midst of all danger. Your help I'll remain in the cold stormy weather when the winds they are blowing. Oh, my love, I'll be there for to reef your topsail. Oh, you pretty little hands, they can't manage our tackle. Your delicate feet to our top sails can go. Your little behind, love, would freeze in the wind, love. I would have you ashore when those stormy winds do blow. Dearest Nancy, for now I must leave you all across the wide ocean. We're bound for to sail, but before we are parted, my love, be true-hearted, for you know I'll be back in the spring of the year. Rain falls, wind rolls, all the folks is it knows. You came over the ford, riding across the moors. Fine flying sparrow, fine horseman. Among Sundays, shades of yellow, shades of green. These are your dreams among my dreams. Fine flying sparrow, fine horseman. Farming man, here's to your heart, your family and land. I'll pay down a ring and a golden band on a field for riding round with a fine flying sparrow, fine horseman. Good morning, light wise maiden and man. My family's dead, my heart is in the ground. I have no land. This is no time for a farming man, not a fine flying sparrow, fine horseman. Sleeping in my bed, dreams run through my head. I dream you are playing with my head. Fine flying sparrow, fine horseman. When first in this country, a stranger, curiosity called me to roam around Europe. I resolved to be a ranger. When I left Philadelphia, my home, we quickly sailed over to England, where forms of great beauty do shine. It was there I did spy this young woman, and I wished in my heart she was mine. It was there I did spy this young woman. She appeared like some goddess to me as she rose from the reeds by the water on the green mossy banks of the lake. I stepped out to wish her good morning, and her cheeks they did blush like the rose. Says I, how the river looks charming, and ye guardian I'll be if you choose. Says she, sir, I ne'er want a guardian, and young man, you're a stranger to me. And she she turned and she stepped away from me on the green mossy banks of the lake. I followed and quickly called after, saying one day, lady, you'll be, and you'll ride in a carriage and horses on the green mossy banks of the lake. She invited me home to her cottage. At the table she bid me sit down, saying, stranger, I am my own woman. I am not some bright treasure you found. This young girl, she tempered her anger, and she posed me this question so cold: why would I take up with a stranger on just the mere promise of gold? So all you young rangers, attention, and no matter how wealthy you be, just think on this American stranger on the green mossy banks of the lake. Just think on this American stranger on the green mossy banks of the lake. your story into town and make it known again, in hopes that when it's written down, it starts to ease your pain, but won't begin to set things straight, but I can do my best. For 14 nights I have stayed here with not one moment's rest. Your kindness flatters me, but no, that will not set things straight. I can't rest till this house is torn apart and out of sight. These bones interred within these walls, please scatter on the plain to break the spell my sister cast on me and my remains. To break the spell my sister cast on me and my remains.
The reason that the Help the Witch album exists, the LP, it's not just because I asked 10 musicians to record some songs and then a record just magically appeared and people were able to buy it. It's because of this band called Stick in the Wheel, this brilliant folk band, and they have their own record label called From Here Records, and they put it out. They set up the crowdfunding for the record, and they also recorded a song for it themselves, and the song is based on a story called Robot, which I think is arguably the weirdest story in the book. It's one of the shortest, and Robot was inspired by a walk on Exmoor. I think the main landscapes in this book that I've been inspired by, in all landscapes I've walked a lot in, there's Dartmoor, where I live on just off the edge of Dartmoor in a little valley at the moment, and I've lived on the edge of Dartmoor and about 5 miles away from it on a couple of occasions before. There's also Exmoor, and that inspired Robot. There's Derbyshire, Peak District Derbyshire, Wild Derbyshire, High Derbyshire, but there's also that other bit of Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, which is more ordinary, where I grew up. That's a factor in the book as well. Definitely the last story, which is another the only other semi-autobiographical one really. It's kind of it's a character narrating it who could have been me or one of my mates in the village where I lived, just over the Derbyshire border into Nottinghamshire, in about 1986, when I was a bit obsessed with ghosts and football. Yeah, and then just also in a minor way, I think Suffolk, Norfolk, M.R. James kind of territory, where I walked a lot, particularly between 2008 and 2013, that creeps in a lesser way as well. But this is, I think of this as like the Exmoor story, Robot, even though there's not anything definably Exmoor in there. I was just doing this walk, I think I started at Porlock, and I'd walk through the woods. I forget the name of the church. Is it Colborne Church? Might be wrong there. But it's a tiny church in the woods, and there are 2 rival families who've been buried facing each other in the churchyard. Someone told me about that, and another story, possibly apocryphal, that a cow went into the church and rang the bell in the church once. But I just walked up from there, and for some reason I was thinking about time travel. And I was thinking, what if on this lonely sunken lane that I'm walking up around the Devon Somerset border, what if a robot just appeared right now in broad daylight and the robot was from the future? Which really is, I mean, that's actually me being an 11-year-old as well. This is the book that I wanted to write when I was 11 but wasn't capable of doing. And I think I then thought I would have liked to write it again when I was about 25. Still, unfortunately, wasn't capable of doing it. Just arguably capable of doing it now, in my 40s, but don't know. But anyway, so I wrote Robot, almost thinking these thoughts about time travel that I'd had a lot as an 11-year-old, because you wonder, okay, if someone's travelled back from the future to now, why haven't we seen them? We'd know that time travel existed because of that. So time travel's never happened in the future. We know this has never happened, and the world's going to end in a few years anyway, so we're running out of time to invent time travel and go back. But I was examining all sorts of questions related to this, and that's what I thought about with Robot. I'd written the whole story by the time I got back to the car. It's kind of, I don't remember doing that before. I've written lots of stories in my head on walks, but never like a complete one. And this is how it worked out. One day I was hiking through a sharp cleft in the woods when I met a robot walking towards me up the sunken green lane. This was a surprise because I'd been told that this particular part of the woods, where the nearest building was a mile away and the light was gauzy and filled with the duplicitous shadows of newly denuded branches, was a place where you might find piskies or fairies or maybe huge liminal dogs. But at no point had anyone mentioned the possibility of robots. I say the robot walked towards me, but that's technically incorrect. It was more that he slid on something between skis and metal feet. He bumped slightly over the exposed roots of beech trees, but took it in his stride, never appeared in danger of falling until he was a foot from my face. He said nothing from his wide, oblong mouth, so I took it on myself to be the one to begin the conversation. "Where are you from?" I asked. "The future," said the robot. "Which part?" I asked. "A very distant part. Hard for you to imagine. Don't even try." "But are you not in danger of changing the course of history now that you're here? You've already walked at least 100 yards along this holloway. I know it's autumn, but there are beetles and other insects on the ground. You've probably killed some of them with your feet. Everyone knows that can do irreparable damage to future events." "We have that figured out in the future. We have ways of sorting it. You really don't need to worry about that. People and robots have been time travelling for a long time in the part of the future where I come from. We have worked a lot of stuff out. Also, they're not feet. They're called rotor socks." "Sorry." A strong gust of wind harassed the tops of the trees, and a few acorns detached from the branches and became a form of boisterous dry rain, almost hitting the robot and me. "Would you like to see it?" "See what?" "The future." It was a vast question, probably the vastest I'd ever faced. "Why not?" I concluded. I'd lost my job the previous month, this being only 4 months after my aunt, the one human being in the world I'd been genuinely close to, had been crushed to death in a tractor accident on the farm where she had lived and toiled. In all honesty, I was feeling quite gung-ho and nothing to lose about the point life had brought me to. So when the robot slid open a metal plate in his chest cavity and invited me to step inside, I did so with little hesitation. He was a much taller, wider robot than I'd realised when I'd first seen him bump sliding up the holloway on his rotor socks, and I was able to climb inside his rib cage with little trouble, although it did help that I'd become very thin of late, particularly since losing my aunt and my job. There were some clanking, rusty sounds, like gears grinding, sounds far more clanking and rusty than I would have imagined might emerge from a robot devised in the very distant future, as opposed to merely the future. Then I felt a sensation that reminded me of the time I crossed the channel from Dover to France on a hovercraft, except exaggerated 100-fold and more redolent of spinning than forward motion. This lasted what I took for about 5 minutes, but what you probably couldn't put a time length on in this limbo state between centuries. Or was it whole millenniums? After that, all was silent. Silent in a blanker, more bottomless way than even the woods when I walked in them at 3 a.m, searching for something I could not name. And while I'd been dimly aware of metal in front of me before, now it was too dark to see anything at all. I reached to touch the back of the robot's chest cavity to give myself some spatial awareness, but I could feel nothing. I'm still in this deep, silent blackness, writing this now, except I don't have a pen. And when I reached out with what I thought was one of my hands to touch my other hand, it wasn't there. One hand might still be there, but I cannot find another part of my body to use, to check and make sure. There is absolutely no way of telling. I cannot feel anything of myself, in fact physically, but I'm still having these thoughts and recording them for posterity. I do not know where the robot has gone. So yeah, that's Robot. I kind of continued, so I continued after this and wrote Ring the Hill, another non-fiction book, which, as I say, has the real account of the stuff that inspired the title story in Help the Witch. But what I'm doing now is writing some more fiction, not short stories, an actual novel. I kind of felt like it would be sensible to do some short stories to feel my way into a novel almost. But the novel is sort of episodic, so it could be argued to be a kind of short stories in itself, and that's called Villager. It's very, very much based on this sort of can't really see it, you just see some trees and shit, but yeah, it's based on this part of the world exclusively, really. Dartmoor's Fringes. It's about a fictional village on the edge of Dartmoor. I'm writing that at the moment, but I'm glad it did Help the Witch first because I've learned from it. I don't think it's a perfect book at all, but it's very me, and I was very free in writing it, and it was a bit of a crazy experiment. I lasted three and a bit months up there in the plague village, in this spooky cottage, being snowed in, before at the first possible opportunity when the beast from the east eased up, I ran back down to the southwest and kind of jumped in the sea as soon as I could, and it was all very expensive and slightly stressful, taking all my stuff all the way up there to move there, and then moving all the way back down here. What is it, something like 270 miles, 280 miles away, and all just for really what is just like quite a minor sort of niche book, but I'm glad I did it. I think it's a different book because of what I did. It's possibly a more colourful, more unusual book because of that, and I enjoyed it, and particularly enjoyed the music that's come out of it, which I hope you've enjoyed too, and thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Do not rumple my top knot. I'll not be kissed today. I'll not be old and pulled about all on a holy day. And if your rudeness you don't leave, there's no more to be said. You see this pin upon my sleeve, I'll run it through your head. And if you rumple my headgear, I'll give you a good clap on the ear. I shall not be so nice and coy, not much to stand upon. You all and pull and do your best, yet I shall gentle be. I won't be put out of my robe, you shall not rumple my commode. And see this pin upon my sleeve, I'll run it through your head. In a box of the stone jug I was born, of an emperor widow, the kid forlorn. And my father, as I've heard say, was a merchant of capers gay, who cut his last fling with great applause for an hearty joke with caper sauce. The nuts inquired in my schoolman play and took me up to the time of day. Fake away, fake away. Nix my dolly bells, fake away. Until at last there was none so knowing, no such policeman or buzz globe going. Fogels and Fawneys soon went their way to the spout with the sneezers in grand array. No dummy hunter had forks so fly, no knuckler so deftly could fake a cly, no sword or stem or snipes could stay, none never reader like me in the lay. Fake away, fake away. Nix my dolly pals, fake away. Soon then I mounted in Swell Street Eye and sported my flashes doggereye. Faintly resolved I'd make my hay, while Mercury's star shed a single ray. And now as there seems such a dashing prig, with my strum all faked in the newest twig, with my full
special bit.
When you left, the trees were gone. They wouldn't let me say goodbye. Hold a rag up to my mouth. Smell of burning I don't like. So we crept away from them, and we started out on our own. We had known the way would be up. The only certainty tonight. La 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 See the fires for miles around. Not like us, we faded away. Keep a watch out from the dark. When the light comes on their back. I never told you everything. I had known it would come to this. So we went in alone, bedding down too tight to be sure. La 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 la
One day I was hiking through a sharp cleft in the woods when I met a robot walking towards me up the sunken green lane. I say the robot walked towards me, but that is technically incorrect. It was more that he said on something between skis and metal feet. He bumped slightly over the exposed roots of beech trees, but took it in his stride and never appeared in danger of falling until he was a foot from my face. He said nothing from his wide oblong mouth, so I took it upon myself to be the one to begin the conversation. Where are you from? I asked. The future, said the robot. Which part? I asked. A very distant part. You really don't need to worry about that. We've worked a lot of stuff out. Would you like to see it? See what? The future. Concluded. So when the robot slid open the metal plate in his chest cavity and invited me to step inside, I did so with little hesitation. There were some clanking, rusty sounds like gears grinding. Sounds far more clanking and rusty than I would have imagined might emerge from a robot devised in a very distant future, as opposed to merely the future. Then I felt a sensation that reminded me of the time I crossed the channel from Dover to France on a hovercraft. After that, it was all very silent. Silent in a blank and more bottomless way, that even the woods, when I walked in them at 3 a.m, searching for something I could not name, and while I'd been dimly aware of metal in front of me before, now it was too dark to see anything at all. I reached to touch the back of the robot's chest cavity, but I could feel nothing. I'm still in this deep, silent blackness. I cannot feel anything of myself, but I'm still having these thoughts and recording them for posterity. I do not know where the robot has gone. is a delicate trade of fame. And when that we have bit the blow, we carry away the game. But if the culling now pass and the lorries from us take, and then they rub us to the wit, and it's certainly worth a mate. When we come up to the wit, our derby's to behold, and for to take our penitency and booze a water cold. But when that we come out again and the merry we meet, we fight the Carly of his coal as he walks along the street. And when we come up to the whip, the varnish Satan cry, "Oh Mary, for your son of a whore, you'll have it by and by." Then every man is brought in and dispose of his can of Hark. When kiss we pop and West will stand to the big cheat in a car. To Tyburn for going on the budge, there stands Jack Hatch, that son of a bitch, that owes us all a grudge. And when he has loosed us and our friends dip in the coal, and then he throws us in the cart and tips us in the yard. But if we have a friend stand by 6 and 8 pence for to pay, may have our bodies back and carry us right away. For St Giles or St Martin's are burying places still, and there's the end of the Dartman's budging the your son have his will. Or go chip jack or fake the boards or fix a nag or thimble rig or nap a yak or pitch a slide or smash a rag. Suppose you duff or nose a nag or get the straight and land your pop. How'd you melt the multi-swag, boosting the blondes, cop the lot. Boosting the blondes, cop the lot. Fiddle or fence or mace or mac or mosquito or flash a drag, then lurk a crib or do a crack. Had of a slang or chuck a mag. Bonnet or tout or bump and gag or out of tax or mark the spot, you cannot rank a single stag. Boosting the blondes, cop the lot. Boosting the blondes, cop the lot. Suppose you try a different tack and on the square you flash a flag, a penny a line and make your whacker with the mama's mug and gag. For nix, a dibs you bag at any graph, no matter what, your merry goblin suits your rag. Boosting the blondes, cop the lot. Boosting the blondes, cop the lot. He sat the spout and Charlie waggle wipes and tickers and whatnot until the squeeze and nips you scrag. Boosting the blondes, cop the lot. Boosting the blondes, cop the lot. Suppose you screeve or go to jack or fake the broads or fix a nag or thimble rig or nap a yak or pitch a snide or smash a rat. Suppose you duff or nose and lag or get the straight and land your cock. How'd you melt the multi-swag, boosting the blondes, cop the lot. Boosting the blondes, cop the lot. Fiddle or fence or mace or mac or mosquito or flash a drag, then lurk a crib or do a crack. Paddle a slang or chuck a mag. Bonnet or towel, mump a gag or out of tax or mark the spot, you cannot bank a single stag. The boosting the blondes and cop the lot. Boosting the blondes and cop the lot. Suppose you try a different tack and on the square you flash a flag, a penny a line and make you whack with the mama's mug and gag. For nix, a dibs you bag, no matter what, you'll marry As I was awaiting down my copper rally, as I was awaiting at one fine day, and spun me a laddie come down to the city to try his luck and spend all his pay. So then he stepped out for thinking to go. He said, where are you going, you pretty young maid? And kisses I went in and love I pretended, but all was in vain cause I was the maid. Oh, I cannot, I will not, I shall not, I dare not submit to your passion, for I am afraid friends will discover I have a new lover, and then they will call me a one in your jade. Listen me dear, there's no need to fear, we'll go to some place where we not be known, and then I relented, at least I consented, but first cause her some money paid down. And saying these words it made me right anxious to think it should purchase a pretty young maid, and when he did money fucking news was granted, and then we had supper I took him to bed. And I made him tired and we were here drinking, and I made him tired and we were here playing. He fell a nodding and I fell a robbing, and I left the bedroom before it was day. I've gathered his money, his clothes for asunder, I've taken his wallet from under his head. This lady had plundered him, rolled all like thunder, but all was in vain cause this lady had fled. Up his watch and his silver I counted, and neither was worth as much as he said. Well, I need the money to save it for Sonny, for without that dog to me boy would be dead.
Well, that's it. Is that it?
That's it, innit?
Fuck. Right, that's okay. Cheers, Aileen.
Cavalry and rushes.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have, and that you've discovered some wonderful new music and new writing. As ever, we urge you to please make the most of your local libraries. Crown Street is here, it's open, it is socially distanced and COVID safe. Check out Tom's book. You can order it from your local independent bookshops, or you could request it at your local library. Please make use of them, they are open. It is the perfect autumnal read, it is the perfect spooky, haunting lead up to Halloween. Thank you so much to all of the artists for the time and effort they've put into their films for us this evening, and thank you to Tom and Lisette for their readings. It's been great, and thank you also Creative Darlington for always supporting this event, and to Crown Street Library for allowing me to sit here and talk at you from it. Hark will be back in 2021, so please follow Tracks Darlington on Facebook or on Twitter, or check out our website for news of more events that are coming, and we'll see you all next time.